Pirates! Andromeda's face was on every screen in the boarding ship. This is the real deal once more. No mercs! No Xenos! It's time to face a real challenge again. Other humans! These Congo fools tried to attack the colony fleet while we were gone. But you're going to teach them what it means to mess with the fleet of the damned. And damned we are. For those of you who don't survive this battle, I expect you to start taking over hell as soon as you get there. I demand a throne made from the bodies of my enemies when I arrive to take over. Savick grinned wide as the Baroness said that. Even before he'd joined the fleet, he'd listened to her broadcasts across the Edge systems and had longed to join her. Anything was better than a life digging in the dirt. That much he was sure after watching his father wither away in the mines. When he'd heard the sirens and heard who had shown up to raid the mines, he had personally bludgeoned the foreman's head in with his shovel to keep him from blowing up the mine shaft, and Savick had been a proud pirate ever since. He focused once more as she snarled and kept speaking. They've taken our homes. They've tried to take our freedom. And the bastards are still trying to take our lives. Show them what it means to mess with us. For those of you who die today, glory awaits you in the afterlife that I'll someday rule over. For those of you who survive today, then you'll share in the spoils and the extra grog rations. Savick cheered at that with everyone else in the boarding ship. Don't expect the Marines to surrender, but let them if they do. But no one touches any civvies! I'll skin you alive and make you eat your own boot if you do. The fiery-headed pirate commander growled menacingly before she stopped and smiled. Just don't forget the most important thing of all. Have fun out there. Savick laughed and cheered, shifting his axe in his right hand and the M2151 in his left. Now then. Bring me victory! She shouted as the boarding ship filled with cheers, and then her face was replaced with a timer. 30 seconds! Savick heard the pilot scream from the back of the ship. He could hear a few worried whispers, but he wasn't having any of that. You fuckers heard the Baroness? Extra grog, loot, and glory in death. What more can we ask for? If you want to get through this, then you have to stop being men and start being demons, devils, dogs. He could hear them start to murmur in agreement, but that wasn't good enough. He smacked the head of his axe against the deck. The fuck was that? I said stop being men. That certainly means stop being fucking pussies. We're devil dogs now. He heard some nervous laughs and a few cheers, but he began to tap the head of his axe against the ground. Let them hear you. Across the void. Let those Congo fucks know who we are. We're devil dogs. Got that? What are we? Devil. They chanted back. Dogs. Devil, he repeated. Dogs. That is better, but not great. Devil. Dogs! By the end, everyone was chanting it as loud as they could. Just then, the timer hit 5 seconds and the battle mist sprayed down upon them. As they sucked in deep lungs full of the combat drug, they all began screaming and stomping more energetically. Then he felt the retro thrusters activate at the last second, before the boarding ship slammed into the side of whatever Congo ship was unlucky enough to be in front of them. At this point, Savick no longer needed to hear and quickly holstered his pistol before pushing his earbuds into his ears and turning on his music through the controls on his wrist. As the music started playing, he grinned wide and shifted his grip on his axe so he could run with it easier. He couldn't hear the torches on the front of the boarding ship cutting through the hull of their target, but the door finally opened and they all began to rush out. The music drowned out anyone else's battle cries, but Savick was screaming as he moved forward. They were lucky enough to have been unleashed in a hangar bay, which meant they'd be getting into the thick of it very quick. Sure enough, across the bay and past the various racks of ordnance and fuel rigs, he saw Congo Marines in their clean-looking armor hastily setting up barricades. There were about 5 main halls he could see ahead that led out of the hangar. He was closer to the left side of the bay, so he quickly started running towards the leftmost barricade. Gunnery would be up front, engine and bridge in the back. Either way, going straight didn't make sense. He had to cut over more into the group of pirates that had emerged to his left, and he soon found himself behind a scrawny first-timer who only had a basic cutlass and a cassetta. That little pea-shooter wouldn't do shit against Congo Marines. As they got closer, the Marines opened fire, and Savick saw the man in front of him stagger a bit. The Kevlar had stopped the bullet, but Savik wasn't interested in helping the pirate get out of harm's way. He quickly shifted his axe so he was holding it just under the head, and then gripped the other pirate by the back of his Kevlar and picked him up off the ground. As soon as the newbie realized what was going on, he looked over his shoulder at Savik, eyes wide with fear, but then more bullets slammed into him, and his eyes closed as the body went limp, easier for Savik to carry. As he got closer to the barricade, he couldn't see shit around the dead guy he was holding, so he waited until he was just at the edge before tossing the dead pirate across the top and into the Marines behind it. As they staggered back, he jumped the barricade, shifting his axe before he swung at the nearest Marine who hadn't been shoved back. The swing was perfect as the very top of the blade head slipped between the edge of the helmet and the neck of the chest piece. Savik felt the temporary resistance as the man's flesh tried to stop the blade, but the blade won and there was a splash of crimson as the man's throat was ripped free of the rest of his body. While the Marine dropped his rifle and clutched at his throat, Savik let go of the axe with his left hand so he could jerk his pistol free, shoving the barrel in the face of the next Marine in the barricade as he pulled the trigger. The strong glass cracked as the first bullet slammed into the visor and then shattered as the second followed right behind. Point-blank .45 rounds had that effect. The third and fourth shots were overkill, but he didn't care. By this point, the Marines who'd been knocked down by the dead pirate he'd tossed over the barricade were starting to get to their feet. Figuring he didn't have long before they could fight back, he jumped over them and ran off down the hall they'd been protecting. Hopefully, the other pirates had enough time to close in on the barricade behind him. He wasn't sure, of course, because he couldn't hear anything but his music, and he had no interest in looking back. Savik knew getting ahead of the main force was dangerous, as pirates had more strength in numbers. But he wasn't some weak little tweaker with a little blade. He had an axe, a body shaped by hard labor, and a mind hardened by his father's belt. Sprinting forward, he made it to the first junction and had a choice of going left, right, or straight ahead into a big room of some sort. As he looked right, he saw more Marines, but they were setting up a machine gun. He saw them just as they saw him, and he quickly fired off every bullet left in his pistol's magazine before jumping forward and out of the junction as a swarm of bullets swept through the air he had just been in. As he landed in the room, he had jumped onto some sort of padding, and as he looked around, he realized the entire floor was indeed padded, while the walls were covered in mirrors. He was in some sort of workout room, it seemed. Not a workout room. He realized it was, in fact, a dojo, as he saw the lone figure across the room from him. A swordsman in a fucking kimono. He looked serious, too. The way he held that big fucking blade, the way he positioned his feet. He even had a secondary blade on his hip. The guy probably knew how to properly duel someone very well. The problem for the swordsman was Savik had no fucking clue how to duel. Well, not properly. He was about to simply load his pistol and shoot the fucker, but then he remembered the Baroness. Have fun out there. It echoed through his mind for a moment, and then he grinned wide. Holstering his pistol, he shifted his grip on his axe and began to walk across the padded floor as the electronic music blared loud in his ears. The swordsman was saying something, but Savik didn't know what, and he didn't care. Instead, he began to pick up speed before suddenly hoisting his axe and tossing it two-handed at the swordsman. The thing about Savik's axe is that it had started life as a fireman's axe, but since only madmen fought fire with an axe, Savik had taken it for himself. It had never been designed as a weapon, and Savik's skill with it came from practice more than anything else. It was terribly balanced for throwing, and he could tell right away that it wasn't an effective throw at all. But the swordsman saw a spinning axe hurling through the air, and quickly shifted his sword to try and deflect it, leaving the blade flat to Savik in his haste. While he did that, Savik charged behind his axe, letting the swordsman deflect it, before Savik shoulder-tackled him as hard as he could, pinning the sword blade flat between them. Up this close, Savik could see the surprise and fear in the swordsman's eyes. That is just before Savik tilted his head into the tackle and his skull connected with the swordsman's nose. Savik weighed about 275 with all his gear on, and the swordsman was perhaps 150. So when Savick hit him while traveling at about 20 miles an hour, the laws of gravity and inertia ruled in his favor, and the swordsman went down hard, getting knocked back several feet, hitting his back and rolling hard. Savick stopped then to pick up his axe as he approached the prone swordsman. To his credit, after a hit like that, the swordsman was trying to bring his sword up to defend himself, but Savick wasn't going for a clean kill. He hefted his axe up and then brought it down on the swordsman's knee. The blade was made for destroying doors and fighting fire itself. Flesh and bone was little challenge to it. The swordsman was likely screaming at this point. Savick could see his mouth open and the pain on his face. He waited to make sure the man was in too much pain to try and stab him before he finally brought the axe down on his head, ending his pain and suffering. Savick looked around the room once more and saw a door in the corner. Perhaps that's what the swordsman was protecting. Before advancing, Savick pulled QR sticker from his belt and slapped it on the swordsman's chest. The other pirates would understand what it meant. Dibs. Then he reloaded his pistol and opened the door and found a back corridor of some sort. He wondered why the swordsman would be protecting it before he realized it connected with the maintenance tunnels. He pushed on then and quickly found the nearest elevator access hatch. He looked inside and then pulled his head back as an elevator nearly took it off. When the metal box stopped, he carefully crawled through the hatch and sat on top of it. His axe wouldn't be any good in such a confined space, so he set it to the side, tugging 2 push daggers out of his armored vest and squeezing his fingers around the grips. He waited for the elevator to start heading up, and then carefully opened the access hatch on top of the elevator. Inside were 2 Marines with rifles facing the door, away from him. He could try to drop behind them quietly, but fuck that. Well, shit. Don't you boys know this is a knife party? He screamed as he dropped down. The Marines turning with surprise, Savick punched the first one in the chest, the dagger between his fingers driving through the armor and into the man's chest. But not deep enough to kill him, as Savick pulled back and realized he might have a serious fucking fight all of a sudden. To their credit, they dropped their rifles as the Marine he wasn't punching moved to pull his knife free, and the one he was punching tried to grab Savick's arm. Instead of trying to change tactics, Savick just doubled down, slamming his left fist and dagger into the Marine's right arm, before pulling his right arm back and then jamming it into the Marine's stomach. Between the blades driving into flesh and the force of the punches, the Marine's attempt to grab Savick was ended by what was no doubt debilitating pain and several cut muscles in his arm. Knowing he had to be quick, Savick dropped the push dagger from his right hand and used that now free hand to grab the wrist of the Marine who had gotten his knife free. Rather than try and shove it away, Savick pulled it forward, driving the blade forward into his own torso. His armor turned the blade for the most part, but he felt something cold along his stomach just under his ribs. With this turning motion, though, it was easier for him jab his left hand across his body and straight into the throat of the Marine, that same sweet spot he'd hit before with his axe. As the blade drove deep into the Marine's throat, Savick saw the crimson blood gush out and down the front of his armor. When he tried to reach up at the wound, Savick just pulled his left hand and drove it in once more for good measure. He turned to the other Marine now, who was staggering back and trying to pull his gun free, but the way his arm was bleeding from the cut up by the shoulder made it clear that was difficult for him. Savick kicked him hard in the left knee, and as he felt a crunch, he leaned forward to shove his weight further onto his foot, snapping the knee completely. The Marine's head tilted back while, likely screaming in his helmet now that his shin bent the wrong way below the knee, which opened up his throat. Savick's left hand arched up then in an uppercut-like punch, which drove the blade up-throat the Marine's throat and into his brainstem just before he went completely limp. Savick turned then and made sure the other Marine was down, and he was indeed. Savick watched the Marine desperately squeezing at his throat as his life slipped through his fingers. With neither Marine posing a threat anymore, Savick hit the emergency stop button on the elevator to make sure the doors didn't suddenly open to a squad of armed Marines. Then he tugged the knife stuck in his armor free and hissed as the pain of the slash along his stomach and side became a hell of a lot more noticeable. He tucked his one push dagger back into his vest and gripped the Marine's bloody knife. Good attempt. He praised the dying Marine as he crouched down, wincing a little as he did. If the Marine was trying to say something, his music still drowned it out. We shall meet again. In hell Valhalla, the fields of Mars, or whatever resting place awaits the likes of us. Then he drove the Marine's knife up under his chin and into his brain to kill him more quickly. He deserved a quicker death. That done, Savick found his dropped push dagger, tucked it into his vest even though it was covered in blood, and stood up. Once he was up, he gripped the railing on the emergency hatch he'd used to get into the elevator, gasping in pain for a moment as the gash along his stomach and side opened up a bit. He grabbed his axe at the edge of the opening and then dropped back down into the elevator. Looking around, he quickly rubbed his hands into the fresh blood, smearing it across his chest, thighs, face, and hair before pushing the button to start the elevator moving once more. It seemed like he had been lucky to stop it when he did, as he only had to wait a few more seconds before the doors opened. As they did, he squeezed his axe in both hands and began screaming at the top of his lungs with everything he had to try and scare the shit out of anyone present behind the door. When the doors finished opening, he saw several armed figures down the hall and figured that it was time for his death. But they took one long look at him covered in blood, wielding an axe and standing over 2 dead Marines before they just tossed their weapons down. That's when he realized the figures ahead of him weren't Marines. They were private security of some sort. What level was he on? He looked around for a moment and stepped out of the elevator expecting to get cut down in a hail of gunfire at any moment. But that moment didn't come. He stomped forward and the security personnel quickly dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads. "The fuck are you doing that for?" "I don't have fucking handcuffs!" He growled out loud before realizing he should probably stop his music. He shifted his axe to one hand and then fiddled with the control unit on his wrist for a moment before the music stopped and he tugged the earbuds out of his ears. "Who the fuck is on a Congo ship that has private security?" he asked the closest armored figure. High-ranking diplomats. They wanted people who looked better than Marines. Savick just snorted as he heard that and looked around the hall he was in. 6 mercenaries. Not one of them wanted to even try and kill him. "Why not try and kill me? You had rifles." He nudged one of the mentioned weapons with his foot. "You're one of the damned. With the Marines dead, who the fuck do we have to impress? I want to live. Fuck the conglomerate." The same figure replied, which made Savick nod. Those had been his thoughts as well when he was younger. "Where are they then? These high-ranking diplomats?" The figure pointed at the big, secure door at the end of the hall. "The code is 751364, and then requires a thumbprint. I can open for you if you want?" Savick nodded and then helped the merc to his feet, holding the axe in one hand as he walked behind the armored figure. As they got to the door, he punched in the combo before pressing his hand on the pad. With a click, the door opened, and he heard the horrified gasps as the figures inside saw him. They were huddled behind some furniture across what had once been a nice lounge from the looks of it. Captain Conway, what's the meaning of this?" Some fancy-looking woman in a nice dress decked out with jewelry gasped. "Our lives mean more to us than your safety," the merc replied honestly. Savick grinned and slapped the man on the back. "You're my kind of guy, Conway. Honesty repays itself. All right." He glanced back and saw the other mercs were still on their knees. "All of you, get your guns and get in here. I don't want any Marines deciding that this lot shouldn't be taken prisoner." The mercs quickly grabbed their guns and got up, jogging down to pass Savick and head into the room with the now crying and gasping dignitaries who had been betrayed. Once they were all inside, Savick stepped in as well, letting the captain lock the door. While he did that, Savick looked across the horrified and whimpering diplomats. 8, 9 women, 4 men. They all looked wealthy as shit. Tons of jewelry and fine dresses. As he walked towards them in their little makeshift barricade, they gasped out, and 2 of the women and 1 of the men seemed to faint. Savick just rolled his eyes at their reaction. Then he smiled as he realized what this meant. 4 dead Marines, 1 dead swordsman, a bunch of VIPs taken hostage. He was in for a big bonus. Maybe better armor or a cool customized helmet. Or maybe they'd let him keep that big sword that guy had in the dojo. Wait, he didn't know how to sword fight. Fuck that. He'd just take the extra money. Then he saw the necklace one of the women had. It had a gold chain and a delicate-looking hummingbird with a sapphire eye. He really liked it, so he pointed to her and said, "Take it off." What? You can't mean... The woman started with a gasp, eyes wide. "I can and do," Savick replied with a growl. The woman whimpered and reached up, starting to unzip the back of her dress before Savick blinked. "What? No, not the fucking dress! The necklace! Shit. I'm sure your tits look like tits and all that. I don't need to see them. Or did you think I was going to rape you here and now? Don't you know the rules? I'm not gonna fuck you! I don't need to get laid so bad I'd risk being blasted out the fucking airlock. You thought I meant your dress? No! Just take the necklace off. The hell's wrong with you?" As he berated the woman, she turned as bright red as he'd ever seen someone who wasn't sunburned, and then removed her necklace, handing it over to him. As he took hold of it, he realized his mistake, as it was now covered in blood, but quickly tucked it into a vest pocket for later. He could wash the blood off, hopefully. Then he nodded at the mercenary captain. "There a comm panel or something up here? Intercom with a radio?" "Over here." He guided Savick to a panel set on the middle of the conference table in the room. Savick rubbed his chin as he tried to remember the settings, then tapped on it for a moment. Static. He tried a different frequency. He didn't hear anything, but there wasn't static either. He pressed the button to transmit, and then his mind turned blank as he tried to remember who to reference. Fuck. Aztec butterfly goddess, obsidian butterfly, it's a popa something. "Who the hell is this?" He heard an angry-sounding woman reply. Yeah, got the right frequency. "Debbie, this is Savick." "What the hell are you doing on this line, Savick?" "I was trying to reach you." He looked over at Conway. "Where are we?" "B deck, diplomat suite." "I'm on B deck in the diplomat suite. I've got 13 VIPs here, and their private security handed them over in exchange for..." He looked at Conway, who held up 5 fingers. 5% of their ransom. "How many mercs?" she asked. 6, he quickly replied. "Fuck that! 5% my ass!" There was a pause. 2% each. 3 if they pass mustard and join the damned. And they only get to collect once all the ransoms are paid. Savick frowned for a moment. Wasn't that phrase, whatever. He looked at Conway, who nodded. "Done. We'll keep this place locked up till the fight's over. I got 5 kills, Debbie. 4 Marines and some fucker with a kimono and a sword." "Stop bullshitting me, Savick. Kimono and a sword. Psh! Did you fight in a rainstorm, too? No wait, you two charged and slashed, and then after a moment he fell over dead? Cut in half clean. Swear to whatever god you want. A kimono and a sword," he promised. Got my QR sticker on him, too. "If anyone else tries to loot the body, they're fucking dead, and no one fucks with my dibs. Show you later. Promise." "You're full of shit, Savick. Now get off this line. I've got squads to manage." "Sure thing, boss," he said and stopped transmitting. He looked over at Conway, then who removed his helmet to reveal a dark, smiling face. Fuck. I thought this was just going to be a boring 2-year stint trying to make contact with aliens. Now I get to make a shit ton of money and join the damned. "Welcome, brother," Savick replied happily, extending his hand before Conway slapped his palm to Savick's, and then they squeezed, each testing the other's strength for a moment. When Savick released, he smiled as Conway shook his hand out, having lost the minor competition. "So then the rules are pretty strict about, He glanced over at the VIPs for a moment, and Savick nodded. "Very. Stick your dick where it don't belong and it gets cut off." Conway grimaced at the thought, and Savick grinned as he hoisted his axe. "Don't worry, my aim has gotten pretty good." Conway laughed then for a moment and shook his head, but Savick wasn't joking. "All right, I'll just not do anything stupid then. But I saw the necklace you took. That for someone special? Got a girl you want to see wearing that and nothing else?" Savick's smile froze in place, but he didn't let his expression change. "Oh yeah, girls in the red light district are available. But you do have to pay for it one way or another." Conway laughed at that then. and Savick tried his best to put on a convincing grin as if he found it amusing, but internally he was growling at the other man. He glanced around then as he realized they were going to be here a while. Well, might as well settle in and wait. Oh, and do you have any medical kits? The adrenaline is starting to wear off, and this cut really fucking hurts. He looked down at his stomach as the pain started to push its way to the front of his brain after lurking in the back. So I said liquor? I wouldn't even touch her! The mercs all laughed as Savick finished the story. To be honest, he was tired of socializing. He longed for quiet or other people to kill. Small talk like this strained his social abilities, but it seemed like he could fake it well by the laughter and relaxed posture of the mercs. They had gotten comfy on the various chairs around the diplomat's suite while the diplomats were still huddled in the corner behind their barricade. He'd left them alone after getting that necklace, so they'd been quiet. Until now. How can you possibly be making jokes at a time like this? You're covered in blood. You've murdered people today and intend to do vile, awful things to us. What monsters are you? Savick looked over to see some of the others trying to quiet down the most expensively dressed of the diplomats, the woman who'd spoken up earlier. So he got up, grimacing a little as he did. The cut along his stomach was fairly deep, and while the glue the mercs had was keeping it closed, it still hurt. He walked over to the diplomats then, watching them huddle closer together. I killed 5 men in fair combat today. They had just as much of a chance to kill me as I had of killing them. That's not murder. That's glorious battle. They had weapons in their hands, and I praised their efforts. I'm sure they would have given me an honorable death were I not as skilled as I am. You are talkers. People who solve wars through speaking and writing. I solve wars through combat. Men like I fight, bleed, and die so you have something to talk about. My Baroness has seen fit that all her faithful soldiers not touch any civilians, so you need not worry about vile things. Unless you're hoping for us to do vile things, of course. He wasn't smiling as he spoke. His victory today wasn't a laughing matter, nor was her assumption about the Baroness and her pirates. The diplomat, though, scowled and got a little red after his comment. I certainly don't hope for anything of the sort. Such an accusation is preposterous. Then why would you suggest it? Savick replied, still with a serious tone and blank face, which made her turn further red with anger. I did not. I'm asking how you can possibly make jokes at a time like this. I was merely sharing a story with my newfound brothers so they may better know me, Savick insisted. He was about to continue when he heard knocking on the door. He looked from the door to the mercs and Conway, who just shrugged. They stood then, grabbing their weapons as Savick moved to the door, looking for some sort of controls to see who was out there. He finally found a small intercom but couldn't find a camera feed. Who's there? Crimson Tooth. That was Bloodaxe's XO. Savick quickly opened the door and stood up straight, closing his right hand into a fist and smacking it against the center of his chest. Soon, several heavily armed pirates, both human and Xeno, walked through the open door. They wore the crimson armor with the black butterfly that marked them as some of Bloodaxe's obsidian company. I, Savick, greet you, Crimson Tooth. I have valued prisoners for our Baroness, he said as the lead Xeno stepped inside. Crimson Tooth was a Sharkin. Sharkin had amphibious gray bodies covered in rough sandpaper like flesh, big teeth and fins, hence the name. They had long been raiders and criminals at the edge of the spinward human territory. But somehow Andromeda had made several clans swear loyalty to her, and now they served on her fleet as loyally as any human. You have done our Baroness well, Savick. She shall hear of your work personally, I assure you. Already an extended 3-day pass to the colony fleet is to be yours, as well as 2% of the ransom on each VIP. Have you harmed any of them? Have the coin fighters? He was never sure why Sharkin called mercs that, but he assumed it was a translator issue. I have not. I have taken a small necklace from one as a trophy. The Sharkin nodded at this, and when Savick pulled the necklace out to show him, he nodded once more. This is acceptable. This ship and all those belonging to our cursed enemy, the Congo, are under our control now. You are free to collect any of your dibs and then report back to our ship. Are you injured? Often it was hard to tell when a berserker was injured or just coated in the blood of their enemies, but Savick nodded. A marine blade along my stomach. The wound is sealed but painful, he informed the Xeno, who nodded. That shall be tended to before your trip to the colony ship. Go now, Savik, and know that you shall receive further reward and promotion when we have decided what it shall be." Savik kept his fist pressed to his chest then, and bowed before the Xeno. Then he straightened up, hoisting his axe over a shoulder as he walked out of the room. Truthfully, he wasn't sure what deck he needed to go back to, but he wasn't about to stop and ask his superior for directions, so he just walked down the hall to the elevator with confidence and pressed a button at random. It took him 3 tries to find the right floor, but no one saw him, so as far as he was concerned, nothing had happened. He wandered the halls of the floor for a while before getting back to the dojo. The kimono was more blood-stained now than before, but the swords were where they had fallen. He collected them then and followed the hall until he saw the first new sign on a wall pointing the way back to the ship. The cleaning crews were already dragging the dead Marines away and starting to strip the ship for parts when he found the airlock heading back to the ship. Today had been a very good day. Savik kept his hand on his wallet as he walked. This part of the colony ship always made him nervous. The red light district was infamous for very obvious reasons as a place where pirates would part ways with their money in exchange for booze, drugs, and sex. Savik didn't care for such places, but he needed to walk through here to get where he was going. It had been a day since he returned to the Obsidian Butterfly and claimed his just rewards, gotten patched up, and then slept. The pain was still there, however, as the good pain medication was mostly reserved for officers or extremely bad injuries. He didn't mind. A good wound should remind a warrior of his combat for days to come. Savik had several such scars across his body and knew he would receive many more before his death. He hoped for that, at least. He shouldn't know it. If he knew it, then he could see the future, and such a thing wasn't true. He had to be careful with such thoughts lest the gods of war punish him for such arrogance. His thoughts, however, returned to the world around him as various women, men, and a few Xenos called out to him. They offered good times, specific acts, and tried whatever they could think of to coax him to stop and ask for prices, or even hire them. Yet he didn't stop. He kept quiet and walked on with a purposeful stride. That didn't stop others from trying, of course. It took him about a half hour to get from the tram that had dropped him off through the red light district to where he wanted to go. As he grumbled a bit from listening to so many people crying for his attention and money, he had to remind himself it hadn't been that long ago he'd come here to find those sins to partake in. But 6 months ago he'd come through on one fateful day that would change him, for the better as far as he was concerned. Then he was at the block he wanted. Out of the clubs and brothels and such, he was now at the edge of the district where those who worked in the red light district actually lived, though he didn't know the name of this other district. Here the people weren't calling for his money. They instead viewed him with worry and suspicion. They likely wondered why he was here. This was where they lived, not where they worked. He approached the building he sought after. There was a group of women outside. They were obviously off shift, as they seemed to be wearing comfortable clothes, no makeup, and seemed entirely at ease. No forced smiles or behavior, but one was different. One was very different than the others. This was the one he was here to see. "Hello, Caroline." The girl who turned to face him was 17, with smooth pink skin and cool blue eyes, but he was focused on her hair, the glorious golden locks that framed her face and fell halfway down her back. "Hello, Savik." She looked a bit nervous. He wished she wouldn't be nervous still. Hadn't he proven himself to her? "I got you something." He let go of his wallet and instead pulled out a small gray box. He couldn't find a black jewelry box like he'd wanted. He handed it to her, and she eyed the box with some hesitation before he pushed it into her hands. When she looked up at him and then back at the box, he also opened it for her. The girls around her clustered together when they heard the girl gasp, and soon they were gasping as well. "Savik, this is beautiful," she muttered, eyes fixed on the gold necklace. "Do you like it?" "I really hope you like it." He licked his lips nervously then, feeling more tense than he ever did in battle. How did you pay for this?" she asked and looked up. I'm getting a promotion." That was true, though not how he'd gotten the jewelry. "Can we talk about it upstairs? I kind of want to get started." When he said that, He saw the look on her face and felt like he'd been stabbed in the guts. But he refused to back down. He knew what he wanted. "Honey, she's so small and you're so big!" One of the women next to Caroline tried to tempt Savick, rubbing her hand along his muscular arm. Truthfully, she was traditionally gorgeous, and a year ago he'd have jumped at the chance. But now he shrugged her hand off. "I have no interest in you," he said, which made the woman scowl. "If you fucking hurt her," she started. "If I hurt her, I would cut my throat in shame," he replied, which made the women around Caroline draw back a bit, surprised. "It's okay. He's the one who pays for my apartment anyway," Caroline informed the others. Then she took Savick's hand and turned, pulling him through the group of women and into the building. They walked up the stairs to the room she rented out. It wasn't the best, but it was nicer than some. It was as much as Savick could afford. She pressed her hand to the door, and it opened for her, as he followed her through the small living room and into the bedroom. She was quiet. He wished she looked forward to this more. Hadn't he treated her well? The usual? He nodded, and she reached under her bed, pulling out an old wooden case that had cost him nearly everything he had 4 months ago. But it was worth it. "Can you put the necklace on? I want to see how it looks on you." She paused then, and looked over at him before pulling the necklace out of the pocket she'd tucked it in, and carefully opened the clasp, reaching behind her neck and clipping it into place. When she turned, he smiled as he saw it. "It's very lovely on you." "Did anyone die for this, Savick?" He could see the concern in her eyes, hear it in her voice. "No, I did not kill anyone to obtain that. Not directly." He'd been extremely careful in washing away the blood. She gave him a hard stare for a moment before she motioned him to his usual chair. It barely fit his large size and creaked beneath his weight, but it held. She handed him the case then, and pulled over another chair for herself. She set it just in front of him, turning to face away while he opened the case. His hand ran over the objects inside for a moment, then his fingers tightened around the one he wanted. His hand moved up and he gently tugged the brush through her hair, as his other hand moved into her hair to support it better. He quietly brushed her hair as he started to tug out the knots and tangles, trying to be as careful as he could. "You're using too much conditioner, or you're not washing it out well enough. Water is limited these days. I'll get you a dry conditioner. Until then, just shampoo it." Over the last few months, he'd been getting better at his brushing techniques. Now he was untangling her wavy golden hair without tugging on her head much at all. No winces or gasps of pain as he worked out the knots, though he noticed her shoulders looked tense. "Please relax. Why are you always nervous when I show up? Have I not provided for you, Caroline?" Caroline let out a sigh. "My friends call me Caro." "Caroline is a beautiful name," he replied. He saw her shoulders shift and then she relaxed. "You're a killer." "This makes you nervous?" "I don't know." She trailed off as he tugged lightly on some stubborn tangles before he resumed brushing. "You could do things to me, snap my neck with just a flick of your wrist." "I never would. I would die before see you come to harm," he promised. She got quiet again, and he thought about the first time he'd seen her 6 months ago. He had been drunk and wandering the red light district when he saw her. She was so nervous, wearing a dress much too revealing for a girl her age. She wasn't part of a brothel. She wasn't licensed. But she needed money. Another pirate had been about to hire her. Savick decided he would hire her instead. When the other pirate objected, Savick broke his jaw. The girl had been terrified, but he picked her up and promised no one would ever hurt her, that she would never have to do what she had been about to do. To Savick, she was perfectly innocent. In his world that was now death and combat and violence, it was his duty to protect such a thing. "You would," she finally said. It wasn't a question. "I would." He agreed. Then he set the first brush into the case and picked up the one with the pearl handle as he went back to brushing. "I do wish you'd be more comfortable around me. Perhaps a massage? With those big fingers?" She asked for a moment, but he set the brush on his knee and then reached up, gently rubbing his digits into her scalp, and she let out a little coo. As he began to further massage her head, she laughed. "Where did you learn that?" "I've been reading." The girl let out a soft sigh as he massaged her head before he finally returned to brushing her hair. "Why do you do this?" she asked. I told you. You reminded me of my little sister. He had no sisters, but he didn't want her to think this had any other meaning to him than the desire to protect and care for this perfect golden idol of innocence. Perhaps she didn't believe him, but she didn't push the topic. Could you sing for me? He heard her snort. What's wrong? You don't have to humor me, Savick. He could hear the anger in her voice. Was it him? What do you mean? I love your voice, he promised and very truly meant it. Yeah, well, no one else seems to think it's all that great. Just keep trying. Someone will hire you to sing, he said as he ran the brush through her hair still. The places that want to hire me don't care about my voice, she grumbled. I'll get you lessons, he promised. Please sing for me. I love to hear you sing. She was quiet for a while before replying. You sing to me first. Me? He asked, startled at such an idea. He stopped brushing her hair then as he thought about the request. I have a terrible voice. Why would you want to hear me sing? Because I haven't heard you sing. I sing for you, isn't it fair you sing for me? He resumed brushing her hair as he thought it over. Anything. I promise you can't be as bad as you think. Whatever song you can think of. He was quiet for another minute before setting the pearl comb back into the box and pulling out the wood one. When he reached up and started to brush once more, he tried to sing for her the only song he could remember his mother singing to him. If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down to the woods today, you better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was will gather for certain, because today's the day the teddy bears have their picnic. He paused for a moment and then went on. Picnic time for teddy bears. The little teddy bears are having a lovely time today. Watch them, catch them unawares, and see them picnic on their holiday. He stopped then, as he frowned a little, trying to remember the lyrics. Then he resumed, somewhat haltingly. Every teddy bear who's been good is sure of a treat today. There's lots of marvelous things to eat and wonderful games to play. Then he got stronger with the last part he could remember clearly. Beneath the trees where nobody sees, they'll hide and seek as long as they please, 'cause that's the way the teddy bears have their picnic. He smiled a little and then repeated the line. Beneath the trees where nobody sees, they'll hide and seek as long as they please, 'cause that's the way the teddy bears have their picnic. He nodded a little, more satisfied with the end of his performance as he kept brushing her hair. She was quiet, though. He started to get a little worried. Did she not like it? That was wonderful, Savick. As she said that, he smiled and felt happier than he had since he'd last visited her. What would you do if I cut off all my hair? I'd bring some wax and polish and make sure you have the shiniest head in the entire district, he replied without missing a beat. She actually laughed at that, and the sound made him smile even wider. As pure and gold as her hair was, the sound of her laughter was like a brilliant beam from the heavens pouring down onto his soul. I guess I'll keep my hair then. Little do you know I'm just grooming your hair until I can turn it into a wig, he said, and she laughed again. He couldn't stop smiling now. Maybe she was finally getting comfortable with him. He really prayed that was the case. As he brushed and combed her hair, she spoke up again. Would you like me to sing for you now? Please, he whispered. When she began to sing, he felt that little beam of light grow wider, casting away all the darkness within him. Caroline somehow held the key to his salvation. He knew that. But to protect her, he would have to return to the obsidian butterfly in 3 days, and with that return to his life of slaughter and combat. Was this how innocence must be sheltered? He didn't know the answer, but for now he just relished her voice and brushed her hair. He couldn't imagine being any happier. Today was a vastly better day than the one before.